G'day guys, I'm Andrew Smith of BlenderTheory, and this is the Blender 2.6 tutorial course for beginners. This course assumes that you have no experience with computer graphics, so it is simple and easy to follow. Tutorial 9, Creating Your First Model, Part 2. In this tutorial, we shall finish creating the planet Earth. A written version of this tutorial is available at blendertheoryonline.blogspot.com. Now that our first sphere is complete, it's time to create our second sphere that will contain the clouds. Make sure that your first sphere is selected and hold Shift and S. In the small menu that appears, select Cursor to Selected. This will move the selection cursor into the dead center of our first sphere. Whenever you add a new object in 3D space, it will always appear where the selection cursor is. The reason why we have centered our cursor is so our second sphere will be in the same position as the first, which allows us to resize the sphere with more accuracy, since the cloud sphere has to be a bit more bigger than the ground sphere. Hold Shift and A and add a new sphere. Since the sphere is added right in the center of our first sphere, we can't see it. To solve this problem, we shall make the objects in 3D space transparent. Press the Z key to do this. We can now see through all of the objects in 3D space. Our second sphere is selected at the moment, as you can see by the orange highlight. Press the S key and resize our second sphere so it is just slightly bigger than the first one. You can press the Z key again to cancel transparency mode. A problem we have now is that both of these spheres are occupying the same space. This may make selecting them individually difficult. To solve this, you can move objects onto separate layers like you would with photo editing programs. This will allow us to keep our workspace tidy and separate objects so we can edit them individually and easily. Press the M key. This will bring up a small graphic that is made of small squares. Each square represents a layer. Clicking on one of these layers will automatically move your currently selected object onto that layer. Since by default our work is on layer 1, click on layer 2 to move our second sphere there. You can freely view whatever is in each layer by clicking on the layer panel in the lower toolbar. You can see more than one layer at the same time as well by holding Shift and selecting as many layers as you wish. Smooth in the second sphere. Add a new material and call it Cloud Sphere. Add a min-art shader like in part 1 of this tutorial. Change the intensity to 0.400 and change the darkness level to 0.300. This is so we can have a highlight around the edge of the clouds so it will blend in with the first sphere while still keeping an atmospheric highlight effect. Activate Ramp and change its shader to normal. Change the transparent slider to around 0.900 and move the solid white color slider to 0.400. Reduce the specular intensity to 0. Add a new texture and change the type to image and select the cloud texture. As you can see, there is a black background color in the cloud texture. We need to make the black areas transparent in order for the cloud sphere to be successful. Just like with the land mask, the colors of the cloud texture shall tell Blender which areas should be transparent and which shouldn't be, with black being completely transparent and white being totally solid. Change its projection to sphere. At the bottom of the texture panel, in the diffuse section, there is an option called Alpha. It is located under the color option. Alpha will affect the transparency of the texture. Select RGB to intensity since we want the colors on the texture to affect which areas are transparent. Change the RGB to intensity color to white so our clouds don't end up becoming a shade of pink. Go back to the material panel and scroll down until you reach a subsection called transparency. Click on the checkbox next to it to activate it. We should now make the black areas of the cloud texture transparent by reducing the alpha option to 0. 0 equals total transparency and 1 equals solid texture. The preview box will confirm that the texture has now got transparent sections. We shall now render both the cloud and ground sphere together to see the final result. Hold Shift and select both the first and second layers. As you can see, the two layers have been combined and will also be rendered together once we do render it. Press F12 to do this. You can notice a problem straight away. We can't see the ground sphere underneath, even though the texture is transparent and the light being cast onto our scene does not. This means we have to change some settings that allow the light to illuminate our ground sphere. Select the ground sphere and scroll to the bottom of the material panel. Open up the shadows subsection and select the box called Receive Transparent. This will allow light to pass through the transparent cloud texture and illuminate our ground sphere. Press F12 to view the result. We should now begin to tidy up our planet. You can see that the cloud texture spills out a little and looks untidy. To fix this, we shall use a modifier to increase the detail on the sphere so it becomes smooth and hugs the ground sphere so it doesn't spill out. Go into 3D space and select the icon that looks like a spanner in the properties icons. This will allow you to add a modifier to your selected object. Modifiers allow you to add special effects onto your objects, such as making them smoother, and can even be used to simulate cloth and so on. To make our object smooth, select Subdivision Surface. As you can see, the smoothness is a result of making the mesh more detailed. Resize the sphere so it's only a tiny bit larger than the ground sphere. Press F12 to see the result. Perfect. As you can see, there is no spill anymore, and the atmospheric highlights blends the edges of both spheres together nicely. We now need to add the final sphere of our project. This third sphere will act as the atmosphere, and would add an extra blue colour to the overall look of our planet. Make sure that the cloud sphere is selected and press Shift and S and choose the cursor to selected, so the selection cursor is centered. Add a new sphere and resize it so it's a tiny bit bigger than the cloud sphere. Move it to the third layer and smoothen it. Add a new material and call it Atmosphere. Change its shader to Minart and set intensity to 0.600 and darkness to 0.300. Add a ramp and move the transparency slider to position 0.600 and move the solid white slider to 0. Change the shader to normal. This is so the edges of the atmosphere are highlighted. This ensures that all spheres are consistent and blend into each other. Reduce specular to 0 to avoid making the atmosphere look fake and plasticky. We should now use a more advanced transparency technique to make the center of the atmosphere transparent so we can see the cloud and land underneath it, while still making the edges slightly visible. Select Ray Trace. Change the alpha to 0.600 to make the entire sphere slightly transparent overall. The Fresnel option will make the center of our object transparent. Change it to 0.900. Finally, change blend to 2.500 to make the visible edges of our sphere blend into the transparent sections to create a smooth transition. The final thing we need to do to the atmosphere is give it a blue color. In Diffuse, open the RGB editor and change the red value to 0.197, the green value to 0.330, and keep the blue value at 800. Press F12 to view the result. Our clouds are now black because they too need to receive light that travels through transparent areas. Select the cloud sphere, scroll to the bottom of the Materials panel, open Shadows and select Receive Transparent. You may need to resize the atmosphere. To save your work as an image, click on the image option in the render window, select Save as Image, select where you want to save it. You can change the file type by using this drop-down menu. This concludes creating your first model, part 2. If you found this tutorial useful, leave feedback in the comment box below. Your feedback will allow Blender Theory to create improved tutorials in the future. For more digital graphics tutorials and information articles, please visit blendertheoryonline.blogspot.com or subscribe to Blender Theory's YouTube channel to stay up to date with the latest videos.